Night fell, blanketing the rolling farmlands in an inky embrace. As I turned onto the narrow gravel road that led to my secluded cabin, a knot of dread twisted in my gut. I had been feeling uneasy all day, a sense of unease that now gnawed relentlessly at my mind. The cornfield that bordered the road towered over me, its rows of towering stalks swaying gently in the breeze. As I drove past, a rustling sound emanated from the dense undergrowth, causing me to jump. But it was only a deer bounding away into the darkness. Relieved, I continued driving, my headlights casting faint beams into the vast expanse. A few moments later, I reached my parking spot, which is a bit away from my cabin. As I exited my car, the eerie stillness of the night enveloped me like a heavy cloak. Walking beside the cornfields, I finally reached my cabin, a small and weathered structure nestled amidst a grove of trees. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking. Something about the atmosphere felt deeply sinister, like something lurked in the shadows, watching my every move. The cornfield, now visible from my front door, waved in the moonlight, its foliage casting grotesque shadows across the ground. I hurried inside, locking the door behind me and bolting it shut. But even within the safety of my own home, the feeling of unease refused to dissipate. It clung to me like a cold, clammy hand. As the night wore on, the wind howled like a banshee outside, the sound rattling my windows. Try as I might, I couldn't shake the gnawing sense that something was amiss. Suddenly, a creak from the back bedroom shattered the silence. I froze, my heart pounding in my throat. With trembling hands, I crept toward the bedroom, my senses heightened. As I reached the doorway, a soft glow emanated from within. I peered cautiously inside, my breath catching in my throat. There, in the center of the room, stood a figure. It was a man, tall and lanky, his face hidden by a shadow. He wore torn and dirty clothing, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. Terror coursed through me as the realization hit me. He had been watching me all along. I stumbled backward, my legs giving way beneath me. The stranger took a slow step toward me, his eyes burning into mine. Time seemed to slow down. I could hear my own ragged breathing, the beating of my heart echoing in my ears. The stranger's face was now visible, and it was etched with an expression of pure malice. With a cold, guttural voice, he spoke, his words sending shivers down my spine. "I've come to collect." I watched in horror as the stranger lunged forward, his hands reaching out to grab me. I screamed, a desperate plea for help lost in the suffocating silence. In a flash of desperation, I grabbed a nearby lamp and hurled it at him, striking him hard in the head. The stranger stumbled backward, his hands coming up to his forehead. Blood trickled down his face as he glared at me with eyes filled with rage. He lunged at me again, but I dodged his grasp and scrambled to my feet. I ran for the front door, fumbling with the lock. Behind me, I could hear the stranger's heavy footsteps pursuing me. With trembling hands, I finally managed to unlock it and stumbled outside into the darkness. As I ran, the cornfield loomed tall beside me, its rows of stalks forming an impenetrable maze. Panic propelled me forward as I frantically searched for a way out. The sound of the stranger's footsteps echoed behind me, growing louder with each stride. I stumbled and fell, my leg catching on a broken stalk. A sharp pain shot through me, but I ignored it, scrambling to my feet and continuing to run. The cornfield seemed to stretch endlessly before me, the rows of stalks weaving and intertwining like a cruel labyrinth. Finally, as my lungs burned and my legs grew heavy, I came to a clearing. There, in the distance, I could see the safety of my car. With renewed determination, I surged forward, my heart pounding like a war drum. As I approached the car, I heard a blood-curdling cry from behind me. I turned to see the stranger standing at the edge of the cornfield, his eyes burning with a malevolent fury. He raised his arm, a wickedly sharp knife glinting in his hand. I screamed and dove into the car, slamming the door shut and locking it. The stranger charged at me, but he was too late. I had escaped his clutches. As I drove away, I could see the stranger in my rearview mirror. He stood there, watching me leave, his expression a twisted mask of rage and disappointment. I left the cornfield behind and went to report this to the police, but the memory of that night will never stop haunting me. Creepily enough, the police never found the culprit, even though they had his blood samples. The stranger's malevolent eyes and his haunting words linger in my mind to this day. I was a college student at the time, and my friend Martin had decided to host a party at his aunt's house in the countryside, a bit far from campus. I didn't know many people there, but I had a couple of beers and chatted with some random guests for a while, and I was overall having a good time. It was starting to get late, and half the people at the party had already left. I'd had enough to drink, so I said goodbye and went out with the aim of getting back to campus. Phone reception was terrible, and I didn't want to end up walking in the middle of the night lost in the woods. I decided to walk the distance back to campus through a shortcut path I knew, a dirt road that stretched through a large cornfield, narrow and difficult to notice unless you knew it was there. I began walking back home, putting my headphones on and putting on some music, and that's when I heard it. A rustling sound, behind me, in the nearby cornfield. Maybe it was just a rat or a fox, but my instincts told me that was not the case. I stopped for a moment and turned around, but I could not see anything. I listened intently, and the noise repeated, coming from the rows of corn behind me, getting noticeably closer, heading my way. I ripped my headphones off in a second, and I could hear the noise clearly at this point. For some reason, I instinctively knew I shouldn't let it get near me. The rows of corn were high, stretching to a bit more than my height, so I couldn't really see what was there. I could simply hear the sound of something approaching me rapidly through the leaves, going straight towards me. My hands were shaking and my feet were starting to get cold. I couldn't face going back the way I'd come because then I would have to pass by the path I thought the noise was coming from, and that didn't seem like a good idea. The only way seemed to be forward, across the rows of corn, hoping to get to the main road on the opposite side of the field. There was a moment of frozen terror when I saw a figure emerge from the corn rows and into the dirt road, not too far from me. It was a man, I could tell from the silhouette, and he was silently heading my way, walking at a brisk pace, seeming to avoid stepping on the short plants on the side of the dirt road. My headphones were dangling off my neck and I shoved them in my pocket. I thought about Martin, my friends at the party, about reaching campus, about my family. I started walking, almost running towards the silhouette of the man. When I got closer, I realized how terribly wrong things felt. The figure looked skinny, abnormally pale, with long, dirty hair. His eyes seemed pitch black, the rest of his face impossible to see. I quickened my pace and muttered a quick, "Excuse me," in his direction, not daring to look at him directly. I realized he was looking at me, that he had noticed I'd come out from the cornfield on his other side. As I was about to pass near him, he turned his head and looked directly at me, and I noticed those black orbs watching me with coldness and a hint of something I did not understand, as if he intended to silently threaten me without uttering a word. I kept walking a bit faster and I escaped that chilling look. My heart was beating like it was about to burst, and it did not get any better as I made it to the edge of the field and turned around to get a look at the main road. I wanted to see if the man was still behind me. I needed to know if it would be safe to get to the main road or not, as I still had a long walk back to campus. When I turned my head, that's when I saw it behind me, between the rows of corn, the faint silhouette of the man, slowly standing there, motionless, in the same spot from where he had looked at me the last time. He seemed to be just waiting there, not moving, watching my every step as I made it towards the main road. I dared not turn around again. My whole body was shaking as I walked to the street, towards the traffic lights. My eyes never left the spot where I had seen that man, until I finally made it to the street, looked both ways and hurried to cross. I never saw the man again after that, but I did hear the sound of footsteps approaching the road from the field as I reached the other side. I did not dare to turn around, and I did not stop walking. From my experience, I learned something new about my instincts. They are very good at spotting when you are being watched, and you should never be too proud to throw a quick glance behind you when you think this might be the case. I was 17 and had just started college. To make some money and save on textbooks, I decided to pick up a part-time job at one of the local grocery stores. It was a bit of a drive, but the pay was decent and the hours were flexible, which worked well with my school schedule. My shift ended at 10 p.m., and since I had a morning class the next day, I was always eager to get home as quickly as possible. One night, as I was making my way back home, I noticed a car behind me that seemed to be following me. I dismissed it at first, but as I continued driving, it became increasingly clear that I was being tailed. Fear gripped me as I tried to shake off the pursuing car by taking different routes, but it stayed hot on my heels. Panic surged through me as I realized the driver had malicious intent. My mind raced, searching for a way out of this nightmare. Desperation forced me to make a split-second decision. I spotted a dimly lit cornfield next to the road and swerved into it, hoping to lose my pursuer in the darkness and tall stalks. As I drove deeper into the field, the car behind me hesitated for a moment before also entering the maze of corn. The darkness enveloped me like a suffocating blanket, punctuated only by the faint glow of headlights and the eerie rustling of corn stalks. I could hear the pursuing car moving closer, its engine revving louder with each passing second. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as I frantically searched for a way out. The field seemed endless, and my heart pounded in my ears, deafening me to any other sound. Just when I thought all hope was lost, I spotted a small opening in the cornstalks ahead. With a surge of renewed determination, I floored the accelerator, hoping to escape through the gap. As I emerged from the cornfield, I could see the pursuing car closing in, its headlights blinding me. I pushed my car to the limit, weaving through traffic in a desperate attempt to lose my pursuer. The chase continued for what felt like an eternity, my pursuer relentlessly on my tail. Finally, I reached a familiar neighborhood and pulled into my driveway, the pursuing car nowhere in sight. Shaking with relief and exhaustion, I stumbled out of my car and into my house, where I collapsed on the couch, replaying the terrifying events of the night in my mind. I never saw my pursuer again, but the memory of that night haunts me to this day, a chilling reminder of the evil that lurks in the shadows.